As a proper disclosure, a review copy of this game was provided by the publisher. Metamorphosis is an adventure puzzle platforming game that also scratches a walking simulator itch, which right away I know is a term which will turn some people away. But with a great art direction and unique premise, it's a rewarding experience for open-minded players who can look past some of its rougher edges. Heading into this title, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. All I knew is that you play as a bug, and the main plot is centered around multiple Franz Kafka stories, including The Trial and Metamorphosis. Even the studio behind it I'd never heard of, and the trailers for the game didn't exactly strike my fancy. But thankfully I gave it a shot, because at the end of the day I quite enjoyed my time with it, although my love of literature probably helped. For those not in the know, the trial centers around Joseph, who is accused of an unspecified crime, and is mounting confusion and frustration as everything is clearly laid out to set him up for failure. At one point, he is even ordered to appear in court, but the state neglects to tell him at what time. There's many more twists and turns, but it ends with the infamous final line of "like a dog," as two men arrive at his home and subsequently take him to a quarry to be executed. Also, before you get uppity about spoilers, this book is 95 years old. I don't care that I'm spoiling it. That aside, this is why we now have a term known as a Kafka trap, which is a rhetorical device which any denial by the accused serves as evidence of guilt. But you're not here to listen to me talk about literature, you're here to know how this game is. And I think it's pretty good. For what it is, anyways. The plot kicks off right away and follows Gregor, and as mentioned, it combines multiple Kafka stories. Besides The Trial, there's the one this game shares a name with, but with one major, or technically minor, change to the narrative. For you see, Gregor in the game is a friend who is staying at Joseph's house when he is turned into a bug. In the book Gregor stems from, he is turned into a monstrous insect, but here, he is quite small. What follows is a fever dream of sorts, but while the game tries to tell an evocative story, it fell apart for me in a few ways. I was never fully disinterested in it, but it also wasn't what kept me going forward. There's also two endings to the game, and they both felt sudden and almost awkwardly implemented. There's certainly deeper meaning embedded into the experience, and the devs really wanted to say something, but the messaging becomes muddled for a handful of reasons. In some ways it felt like extra content or levels were missing, but even while it's a narrative-heavy game with a narrative that didn't quite hook me, I was still enthralled by the game as a whole, largely because its art direction and level design kept me excited to see what came next. Certain areas play out like a surrealist lucid dream, and one early section features some truly awesome visuals. You get sucked into a piece of paper, and there's floating bits of graphite that stem from the pencil that wrote the note, and it all looks really cool. Throw in a twisting swirl of letters, and it's a feast for the eyes. I dug it a lot. Outside of that, any level in which there's people in the background is equally great. One level takes place in a lawyer's office, and when you arrive, he's sitting in a chair listening to music, and it's just an epic atmosphere. I adore taking it all in from such a minuscule perspective, though for me, I've always enjoyed stuff like this. During my youth, I watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and desperately wished I could go on such an adventure. The same occurred while playing Army Men games on my PS1. The idea of exploring environments from such a height has always scratched an itch, and the way this game handles it is really cool. If there's one complaint in this regard, it's that there are very few levels. Technically there's 8, but that's being generous as 3 of them are far from full-sized. I really would have liked an extra 1 or 2. Gameplay itself is quite simple. At its core, the game is a platformer, so there's a lot of running and jumping, and movements feel good once you get used to it. Thankfully, the platforming is fairly precise. One interesting mechanic is that you can walk over ink or glue or stuff of that sort, and you become sticky and can walk up walls and other objects. This is incredibly beneficial if you just enjoy exploring each environment and taking it all in. There's a lot of detail within each area, and I strive to see every square inch. In an attempt to reward thorough exploration, there are 20 effigies hidden throughout the game, but besides serving up a trophy once all had been destroyed, there wasn't any other noticeable reward, just your typical mindless collectible it seems. Outside of platforming and exploration, there's minor puzzle elements, but none of them really ever stopped me in my tracks. The ideas behind them were cute, however. One involving a loose wire and some glue was a neat enough idea. I do wish they had been more complex though. Besides that, there's what could be defined as side quests in a couple of levels, and these are found by talking to other bugs. They're all pretty mindless activities, but the conversations expand the world's lore if that intrigues you. On a technical level, the game runs well enough, though there are some visual hiccups here and there, but nothing that hurt the experience too much. There's ample dialogue, and thankfully the voice acting is serviceable. It's not memorable, but it does the job. How it's handled is another story. There's a few segments where life-size humans are droning on in the background, and the immersion it adds cannot be overstated. In one area, you enter a drawer and the voices become muffled, and it adds a sense of realism to the whole thing. It did a lot for me. And that's about it. There's not a whole lot to say about Metamorphosis. Overall, I dug it. I'm not sure it can justify its cost of $25. I think had it been in the $15 range, it'd be an easier sell, but if you have a few hours to spare and are looking for a cute experience with unique level design and exploration that is driven by your own curiosity, then Metamorphosis is worth the time. If rating on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it a 7. I just wish there was more of it. I got immersed and lost in the levels and would love to have had more areas to scurry about in. Oh, and as I do with most reviews, I did get the Platinum Trophy. I was even the first in the fucking world. How's that for a humble brag?